Welcome to Voice Bootcamp, a global name in unified communication. Hi, my name is Faisal Khan, Cisco Voice Instructor at Voice Bootcamp. In this particular lab, I'm going to show you how to configure a peripheral gateway for Call Manager. In order for ICM to communicate with Call Manager, you require a peripheral gateway. Peripheral gateway basically allows you to convert ICM signals into a format so that Call Manager can understand and vice versa. So the task that we're going to do is, before we configure peripheral, we're going to define the PG settings in the PG Explorer, such as logical controller, physical controller, and peripheral interface manager. Then we're going to ensure the JTAPI username and password is defined. We're going to install a JTAPI client and install a peripheral gateway at last, and then followed by the validation of the peripheral gateway. The first thing you gotta do when you log into when you're configuring peripheral for Call Manager is that you must define agent desk settings. Agent desk settings is under available list tools. It's basically predefined set of configuration that are required for agent. So here you define an agent desk settings. For example, I have created one called default, and I put settings that are going to be applicable to all the agent that are associated with this desk settings. So for example, if I want auto answer, if I want ring no answer time, reduce it down to 20 seconds, emergency method, wrap up time, things like that. Once this part is done, you save it, then you open up PG Explorer. The PG Explorer allows you to define your peripheral. So if you click on retrieve and if you don't see anything, that means no peripheral has been configured. So you can go ahead and click on add PG, and you will see the first list. For example, like the one that I have is basically it's going to be PG, but you can define the name you want. Now the logical controller ID that you see right here, these are not created until the moment you save these settings. The client type, if you're going to do unified CM PG, then you will select CUCM/soft-ACD. If you're going to do a system PG, then you can use a generic PG. Generic PG will be basically allows you to have the single PG with multiple PM. In this scenario, you have one PG, one PM. CTI port, CTI address if you need to define it, an interval 30 or 15 minute interval is only available on version 8 onward. Once you save these settings, you can go ahead and add a peripheral. For example, add peripheral. So you'll see something in the next screen. So if I click on this and I say add peripheral, you'll have something like CUCM _1_1. Now if I select the one that I have created, you'll notice the name, peripheral name, client type soft switch, CUCM soft switch, location just a location ID, abundant call. This is where you're going to define default desk settings, the one you just created earlier. Agent phone line control, all line or single line. If you say all line, that means multi-port supported, multi-line supported. If you want this Call Manager to act as a routing client, meaning that you should have the ability to request a route, you should select enable post routing. If you do enable post routing, go to routing client, make sure your routing client name is configured, define all other parameters that are required. Under advanced, nothing is required. Under agent, nothing is required. So this is basically how you would create a peripheral settings. Now for CVP, on the other hand, we'll cover in the next particular lab. So once this is done, your next step is to validate that the Call Manager has the username and password configured. In our case, we're going to validate that because we already did that by ourselves. So under application, user management, go to application user. Make sure you have an application user called JTAPI. Right there. There are actually a few of them. I'll go ahead and delete them. Once that part is done, you will log into PG server. In the PG server, you have many different processes that are running. So right now we're not going to we're just going to minimize all this. you want to do is go to from the PG server, you want to log into the call manager server first, and then once you log into call manager server, you want to go to application menu, go to plugin. When you go to the plugin, you want to download the JTAPI client plugin on this server, because this server is going to communicate with call manager, so it must have the JTAPI client with the latest update on it. So here you can download the JTAPI client for 32-bit Windows client. You need to install that, and when you install this client on this particular server, simply put the IP address of your TFTP server when it asks for. There's nothing complicated about that. Once you install the JTAPI username, now just wanted to quickly talk about the logical controller and the physical controller. Going back to your router, you need to monitor, write down these IDs. So if, let's say, if you are adding the call manager first one, your logical controller ID is going to be 5000, physical controller ID is 5000, peripheral ID is 5000. If I add the second one, for example, add a peripheral, then it will, logical and the physical will remain same, but the peripheral ID will change depending on which one is created. Now the last one you have is this one, for example, 5003. So if I add, see, peripheral ID is 5003, but logical control is also 5003. But let's take a look at what happened if I were to create a new one under this. Add a new one, so we'll call this just test, and save. Okay, we have to select the routing client. So as it is saved, take a look at the peripheral ID is 5004. Just because it is underneath the CUCM1 or per logical controller 5000, peripheral ID is 5000, doesn't mean the next one that you create underneath the same peripheral gateway is going to be the 5001. It all depends on the what is the total number of PGs configured here. So it is going to be peripheral ID 5004, but the logical and the physical controller remain 5000. So if you want to point to this particular PIM, peripheral interface manager, CUCM1_test, you need to define the logical controller 5000 but the peripheral ID 5004. That's the only way the ICM will be able to communicate. Alright, so going back to PG, you want to go to UCC tools, select the PG gateway setup. You will have this particular window come up. Here you select the PG1A, so you click on add, select peripheral gateway. You will have something like this. So the node property, you're going to select the first PG1. Now if you're going to select PG, let's say 15, make sure PG15 is enabled in your routing. So if you're not sure, take a look at the lab where we define the routing component of the ICM. Also, you can also take a look at the lecture on DVD that explains how this PG must be numbered. If this PG is going to be part of a duplex environment, meaning that you have a redundancy on the other side, select duplex peripheral gateway. Duplex configuration will be available in the next volume. Here we're going to select the client type. The call manager is going to be the client type, so click next. When you do that, it's going to stop the service, the existing service. A bunch of process will disappear. So here I have I go ahead and add a PIM. Now see the logical controller ID, I put 5000. That is right here, logical controller ID from your PG Explorer. If I was configuring CUCM number 2, the logical controller ID was going to be 5002. So because we're doing the CUCM1, so logical controller is 5001, and because this is the first PIM, click on edit. You define a peripheral interface name, that is from right here. PIM, the name right you define in your peripheral. The peripheral ID is 5000, and the agent extension will be 4-digit. IP address of the call manager, and then the JTAPI. You see how the JTAPI name is changed here, so I'm going to change it to JTAPI and Cisco, because in my call manager I do not have that username configured. So application user, I have JTAPI. Password is going to be Cisco. Now once I do that, make sure you have associate JTAPI with all the devices that's going to control. So we'll do that. Click this is IP address of the call manager. The version has to match based on your JTAPI client. If you click on advanced, the system ID 1 should match pretty much the same thing as saying PG1 system ID 1. If it's PG2 system ID 2. Here you define which site it should register to first, and if site A is local and site B is local or remote. If you select one of the site being remote, you'll notice that minimum bandwidth required or usable bandwidth required will be defined, and the heartbeat will be milliseconds, so 100 milliseconds 4 times. Here you define your private interface for PGA and PGB along with high as well, so the high priority traffic will cross the high interface, network interface. For PG, define the visible. PGB, you can define the visible. If it is simplex, you can put the same name all the way, so that you have to define the router as well as router B. Once that's done, just simply click next and it will install the JTAPI, so a peripheral gateway. It will give you an option to restart the service. As you restart the service, you can go to the regedit. Be careful when you're modifying the regedit. So you go to the hlocal machine, software, go to Cisco system, ICM, customer, instance number, select not CTIOS, select the PG that we just created, PG1A, go to EMS, current version, library, process. Now here the JGW, make sure you have EMS display to screen set to 1, okay, so that it can be displayed on the screen on this process. If I click on start and finish, after a while bunch of processes will show up. While we do that, if I go back to call manager, go to CTI route point and click on find, you'll notice its registration status is unregistered because we deleted the wrong username. My mistake, by the way. So PG1A is activated and it is trying to configure shutting down, as you can see, activating. It's GW is another tools you want to monitor to see if it is working or not. And as you can see, PIM status is active, JW status is also active, so that means it was able to communicate with call manager. Just because it's active, it does not mean it is going to be registered. So even though it is registered, it might be registered in my case because I have finished the remaining configuration. The only way this will be registered if you configure a dial number in contact center enterprise. Otherwise, this unless you configure the dial number, it will not be registered. Alright, so this is basically the process of adding a peripheral gateway for call manager.